In the previous videos, you saw how to create a simple user interface that gave you a button and a label. You saw how to use an IBOutlet to tell the view controller about the label so that you could refer to it in code. And you saw how to use an IBAction to get the user's input via pressing a button. In this video, you'll see how to extend this a little further by giving your user text input capabilities. And when the user touches the button, we'll set the value of the label to the contents of the text that was entered by the user. Let's get started. First, I'm going to tidy up the UI a little. I'm going to bring the button up here and center it. I'm going to bring the label up a little higher and center that too. And now I'm going to add a text field. As you scroll through the controls list here, you see the controls that are available to you as an iPhone developer. And I'm going to pick the text field. I'm just going to drag it up here and I'm going to drop it in a way that's centered using the guides. And then I'll make it a little wider. I'll center it again. Something like that. Now we'll want to be able to refer to the contents of this text field in our code. So in order to be able to set the label to its content, so we'll need to create an outlet for it. Now, if you remember in the last video, when we set the outlet for the label, we said IBOutlet UI label star label 1. But somehow we had to know that the name of the label control was UI label. So how do we know the name of the control that we've just placed, this text edit field? The best way to do that is to select the field itself and then look up here. And when you go to quick help, you'll see it describes it as a UITextField. So now I can go back and I can create an IBOutlet. I'm going to call it a UI text field and I'm just going to give it a simple name like TF1. So now I've defined the outlet that I'm going to be using, and these little hints on the sidebar show that I haven't actually wired it up yet. If you remember in the previous lesson, UI label was wired up and the button one click action was wired up, but the text field hasn't been wired up yet. So what I do is I come back here, I select my view controller, I hold down the control key and I drag and drop onto this text field. I let go and it gives me my available outlets, and we see that TF1 is one of them. So I select TF1 and I can confirm by clicking on here, and we see that TF1 has been wired up as an outlet to what's called the round style text field, but that's in reality it's a UI text field. And if I come back to my header, we can see now that it has been wired up. So now I'm good to go, that I'm able to access the contents of the text field in code using TF1 as a reference to that text field. So if I come back here and instead of saying label1.text equals pressed, I can now say, on clicking the button, label1.text equals tf1.text, where text is the property of the text field that contains the text entered by the user. So let's run this and take a look at how it works. Now we can see my application is running. I have the label and it just says label because I haven't set any text. I have my text field and I have my button. Now you'll notice that as soon as I entered the text field, the keyboard would appear. So I can type something into the keyboard. Like if I say hello and hit the button, we now see that the label has changed to hello. But there's a problem. The keyboard's still here. I can't dismiss it. So what do I do next? There are many ways that we can handle the dismissing of the keyboard, but we're going to do the simplest first. And to do that, it's important to understand what's actually happening here. So when we put the focus into the text field by touching on it or by clicking on it in the emulator, something called a first responder kicks in. And the first responder to text input in the operating system is the keyboard. So to get rid of the keyboard, what we really want to do is resign first responder status. Now, there are many ways that we can do this, and there are many user interface paradigms for this, but in a simple application like this, the logical way to do this is that when we press the button, we want to tell the text field to resign its first responder status and therefore get rid of the keyboard. So let's take a look at how we would do that. So I'm going to stop the application from running. I'm going to come back down to my implementation file, and if we remember this action, the button one click action is what executes when the user clicks the button. So here we can just say TF1, which is how we're referring to our text field, resignFirstResponder. And then we save this and execute it, and let's take a look what happens. So now when I run my application, I get the application as before. I come in here, once I put the focus into the text field, the first responder kicks in and the keyboard comes up. I type hello. I don't have anything on the return key yet, but what I do have is when I press the button, now as well as the label text being set, I also said resign the first responder. So I press the button and the keyboard goes away. So this is one scenario of where a first responder would kick in, and once I go back into the text field and give it focus, the first responder comes back, and when I press the button, it resigns the first responder and gets rid of it again. Over time, you're going to be looking at more scenarios about where it'd be more appropriate to resign the first responder status. Like, for example, I'm pressing the return key, or there are other keys within the keyboard, for example, for search and like for done for basic text editing and that type of thing. But for now, this was just the first example, and just to get you used to the concept of a first responder and how you would get rid of it.